decades, the construct of work has been closely tied with going to office. Office is the place where you go every day for your employment, and we spend anywhere between 8 hours or more of our life daily. Separating work from office is almost unthinkable, even to the most progressive tech companies. For people employed in the manufacturing space, the concept of working from home is almost alien. That is, till now. As the COVID 19 pandemic swept across the world, stay at home became the norm. Offices were forced to shut, and the entire workforce had to operate from home. The largest work from home experiment in the world had begun. While there were apprehensions and doubt if this would be pulled off, 6 months later, it seems like a success. In fact, many large organizations are now talking about some or all roles moving to a work from home. If this is the case, what happens to our fancy offices? If work can be carried on from home, do we need our offices at all? Conventional wisdom around why and what we need an office for has been completely upended. But is it time for us to write the obituary for a place that played such an integral part in our adult lives? Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Staffing and HR Solutions firm Randstad India, Paul Dupuis tells us if the office is overrated.
Thank you, Paul Dupuis, for joining us today, and it's a pleasure to have you here with us. Last
Thank
6 months has been unprecedented, and we are all basically working out of home and remotely. What has been the experience like of not being able to go to office?
Well, first of all, it's a great question, Pran. I think all leaders are dealing with this challenge right now, and along with it came the sudden change in the way we work and the way we engage with our teams, with our colleagues. And the nature of our business, what we do, staffing and recruiting, it's all about the face-to-face contact. We help people move forward in their lives by getting gainful employment, and that requires close collaboration. So we were in the people business, and suddenly we were forced to be apart and to work together virtually. And that was very new for many of us, me included. Add in the fact that I'm a long way from Canada, where I come from, and here in Bangalore as well. So navigating in a new environment in a different country has been a challenge. On the other hand, actually, it's opened up lots of discoveries. And one phrase that I've been using a lot myself and with my teams is that crisis brings opportunity. Of course, in business, but also personally, and how we conduct our days. How do we, again, navigate through challenges? So yeah, it hasn't been easy, but it's also, when I think over the past 6 months, the amount of creativity and ingenuity and agility that's been shown all around me, and I think even myself included, it's been remarkable.
Right. So, that brings me to the question: is the need for an office then overrated? In your context, it might be a little different, but what about for others?
Well, it's a very real question right now for most organizations. So if we just rewind back a little bit, and you remember earlier this year, the signs of the economy growing in India and several other countries were actually pretty strong. I would say we all came into 2020 with the wind at our backs, right? We had big goals and big plans. And every CEO that I speak to and CXO I talk to will tell the story of the fall of 2019, setting in plans and ambitions and goals and targets and so on, including hiring to grow. That 2020 would be a landmark year. And then we came into the new year, and of course we all know what happened when we came into January, particularly February, and then we knew once we got into March that something was coming. And that's when action really started mid-March. When I think about that transition from working as usual or business as usual in an office or face-to-face environment to going completely working from remote or working from home, as some people call it. Again, it's an incredible, dramatic change for many organizations, including ours. And that doesn't happen easily. And the organizations that I'm engaged with across India, across all industries, will tell a similar story. I think the ones that were on the leading edge, that were already, let's say, ready for working from remote, already had a culture of hybrid working. They embraced this challenge pretty quickly. They were agile. They were able to ensure that their workforce was ready to work from remote.
These would be generally in the tech industry, I suppose.
Especially IT, especially the tech industries. And I would say especially MNCs particularly, but also some of the large Indian players were already accustomed to this notion of working from remote. And so the more traditional organizations, and I would say in a way Randstad, we are a 60-year-old company. It's always been focused on the touch element of what we do. We had to move pretty quickly and be creative. And I've seen that with many organizations. If you go to the far extreme, manufacturing organizations, or your very traditional local domestic Indian company that was all about presenteeism, right? You go to a desk in an office to work, and that's always been the culture for these companies. And suddenly, we were not able to do that. So those companies also had to make some pretty drastic changes, which were quite foreign to them. But to your question, is an office necessary? I can tell you that just about every CEO or CXO that I speak to now has that question on the top of their mind. We started with first, let's respond to this crisis. Then we went into recovery mode. Let's continue to move the wheels, talk about productivity. But now everyone I'm speaking to is thinking about this notion of the office, and more importantly, future-proofing the way we work. And so we've already seen evidence of companies across India reducing their physical footprint. IBM has given notice on about 1 million square feet to reduce in India. We've seen a lot of large companies doing that. Many companies have announced that they're allowing their employees to work from home indefinitely. It started off as until October, then December, and now we hear about June 2021, and in some cases permanently. So it has raised this question, do we need an office? So my take on this is, I think we do need an office. I think we do need, the concept of the office will continue to be important, but the role of the office will change. What I foresee happening is that the office will no longer be a place where you report to for work. The office is a place where you report to for communication, collaboration, and celebration. So in other words, the office is remote, and it doesn't have to be home, by the way. That's the other thing. Work from remote, I think, will become a more commonly used term.
This also makes me wonder, offices, for bigger companies, offices was also a projection of what they stand for. The bigger the office, the fancier the office, the more attractive you were in some ways. Will that notion also change a little now?
It's changing as we speak. I mean, think about the intake of new graduates that had planned to join a company, and one of the attractive features of joining that particular company, and I won't name any companies, but we can imagine who they are, particularly in the tech space, was the funky office,
the cool office,
with the free food in the cafeteria, the ping pong tables, the football tables, keep going. I mean, you can go on and on. All of that is a non-issue now, at least for now. Now, maybe in time when we're able to, utilize the offices again, but it will no longer be the main reason that people join companies. And talking with a lot of talent attraction CXOs who are kind of facing this challenge of how do we attract the best talent to join us and stay with us in this new environment, when it used to be about, as you said, look at our big, beautiful office, our big footprint. I think it's going to be less about that. It's more about the why we exist, purpose of the company, the positive impact that the company makes on the world. And this is becoming more and more important, I think. And COVID has woken us all up to what's really important. So companies that stand for something and have a strong North Star, a greater purpose, will have an edge in attracting talent. But also it's about what's in it for the employee. How can they learn and develop in this new world, this new environment? And how will the company support them in this new, let's say, virtual and hybrid working environment?
So, what does all this working remotely, working from home, what does it do to a company's culture? We hear so much about a company culture, although we're a little fluid about what company culture is actually. But what does it do now?
Well, for all of us, and I'm sure you include, Pran, if you think back to your very first day working in a particular organization, we never forget that first day. And there's lots of studies out there about this, that your first day actually is an indicator of what happens in the long run. Your first day experience, first week experience, the onboarding, induction, and so on. We've always built our onboarding and induction programs around face-to-face. The cultural communication and transmission of that sense of belonging, of what the company stands for, the people, relationships, all of that was done face-to-face pre-COVID. And I would say a large majority of companies do it that way. Even the tech companies, in the beginning, the very beginning stage, the onboarding and induction, it was always face-to-face, because there was this belief, the way you build relationships, the way you build that kind of sense of, let's call it psychic equity, the emotional connection with a company, it happens in person, because we are human, regardless of our role. And now that's gone. And I even see with the intake that we've taken with new graduates, bright, young, eager, ambitious new grads coming in, and they have fully come into Randstad onboarded in a virtual environment. What a different experience. They've never met their colleagues face to face. And yet they're on board, and we're doing our best to help them feel that sense of belonging, but also what we stand for, who we are. And how do you do that in a virtual environment? I think that's a question that remains unanswered, but what I can tell you is that, again, crisis brings opportunity. I'm seeing so much creativity now from companies on how to engage with people to make them feel that they belong, that they're part of the company and part of the organization and the culture. And these are efforts that we wouldn't have had to take in the past. And certainly for leaders, this has become a key responsibility and an accountability to ensure that employees feel that sense of belonging. And we accomplish that in lieu of not being able to do it face to face. But it's an ongoing question a lot of companies are going to have to deal with now. Because in this new world, a lot of our engagement will be virtual.
Right. So what does this do to the role of leaders? Does the basic tenet of what constitutes a good leader change when there is no office setup?
Yeah, well, if you think about the generations of leaders, certainly my generation, I'm over 50. So I come from that generation of even pre-computer, pre-internet, everything was about face-to-face. And everything was always about being connected with your people in person. I talked about presenteeism earlier. Again, I've been raised in an environment as an individual contributor and then as a manager and certainly now as a CEO, where it's a given to be with your people, physically be sitting around a desk, and strategy is built together in a room with a whiteboard. Conversations by the water cooler, by the coffee machine. That's where the magic happens, right? It's where relationships are built, and so on. And of course, celebrations. I think leaders, what I'm seeing, and it's regardless of the generation, leaders are faced with this new challenge of being more compassionate. And that's something new for a lot of leaders, right? We always were focused on the output. So building high-performing teams was about having a strong vision and making sure they had the tools and so on, and the metrics to measure and so on, and then the cadence, and then of course eventually output would follow. That's all been overruled by this thing called compassion. And it's interesting because it's unexplored, I think, for a long time when I was coming up, first we started with IQ. We talked a lot about IQ. And then this new thing came in, EQ, emotional quotient, right? And what I see coming next is CQ, compassion quotient, particularly for leaders. And compassion is one step beyond empathy. And empathy is interesting. Empathy is a reactive emotion you have. If someone's not doing well or struggling, you feel for them. Compassion is actually action. It's taking action. It's one step further. And I think a lot of leaders, this is quite new to them. And leaders are learning as we go on how to lead, how to inspire, how to motivate, how to measure, and ultimately how to support our teams in this new world.
Interesting. you've talked about, the opportunity that the crisis brings. What are some of the challenges that you think, will still remain when you're working in a setup like this?
Well, there are a lot of challenges. Certainly, I would say the challenges and opportunities go hand in hand. I mean, it's all how we see the world, right? I think one of the challenges is more this long-term view of how we will work, the future way of working. And there's a lot of ambiguity and certainly a lot of adversity right now. And one of the things that many leaders struggle with is not being able to see through the fog, but being tasked with steering the ship in the right direction. In other words, you're steering blindly, and that's challenging. So certainly one thing that I've discovered myself is I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict when COVID will end or if it will ever end. Nobody can. And the modeling by very smart people has been done, and the modeling has been wrong several times. And that's not a knock on the smart people. And we know in India, the modeling originally said mid-May, and then it went to mid-July. Latest I heard was mid-November, right? And now I'm hearing perhaps even early next year. So, the modeling is changing. We don't really know. So as a leader, leading in a direction where you can't really see where you're going, that's a big challenge. But again, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity for leaders to develop that sense of predicting the future. And how do you do that? You look at the past. I'm a big believer that, we've been through a lot of crises in our life. And a lot of people are saying this is unprecedented and it's completely alien. But on one hand, sure, a global pandemic is in our current world, although previous generations have experienced it with Spanish flu and go way back to the plague. But if you think about, break it down, what are we feeling? We're feeling fear, uncertainty, ambiguity, adversity, self-doubt, etc. We've all experienced those emotions at one point in our life, as leaders or not. So actually, in a way, this is not unfamiliar. So I like to look back and think about how did we navigate through those times of ambiguity, adversity, and fear, and how did we get over it? And there lies the answer. So yeah, challenges are more tactical. They're more logistic, I think. It's less around, okay, how will we communicate? We found a way. How will we conduct reviews, business reviews, or performance reviews? We're finding a way. How will we onboard new colleagues? We're finding a way. How will we give service to our customers? We're finding a way. So I think all of that, we will solve that riddle, but it's more about the other things that I talked about.
That brings me to my last question. You did talk about it, the initial part of our conversation, but when we come out on the other side of things, when the virus is over, do you think we still need offices?
Yeah, so I think when the dust settles, hopefully the dust will settle at one point. We know this is a marathon. We know this could continue for some time. I think the office will always be a necessary part of any organization. But I think it's clear that all of us need to accept one fact. The old days, let's call it before COVID, the days of offices full of rows of desks, hustling and bustling offices with people sitting in tight quarters and so on. I think those days are gone. I think the notion of islands of desks will be moved aside and replaced by a different kind of office, a different purposed office. And so that requires different layouts and different ways of communicating, collaborating. But I absolutely believe that, as humans, we always still want to be able to connect to something tangible and real. Right. It's hard to get emotionally connected with a computer screen, people right. on the screen. We do our best and we try hard with lots of engagement activities, and there's some amazing things happening. I'd say especially in India, the organizations that I engage with, really, really cool things happening to engage. But at the end of the day, at one point, we are human beings. We want to stand up from this chair and we want to go out the door and we want to go be with our colleagues, because that's where that emotional connection really comes in, and that's where it's created. So I think the office, in a way, we used to say, I have to go to work, right? I have to go to the office to work. I don't think we're going to say that. I think the office is going to be a different kind of destination. You could say, I'm going to go to work when I go to my den, my living room, my bedroom, or the cafe nearby. That might be going to work. perhaps the office is a place where I'm going to go to celebrate, to collaborate. So I think, offices will absolutely be necessary, but change is required. I think the organizations that are holding on to this notion that we will return to where we were before COVID, I really recommend to rethink, the notion of the office as we think about future-proofing the way we work.
Great. So office as a place where we go to celebrate, I think that's a thought that I really like. Thank you so much, Paul, for talking to us. It's been most engaging and interesting, and I wish you luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And everybody, please stay safe.